Hey guys, welcome to the new podcast that we're putting out. This is the interview series that I've been putting together. It doesn't really have a name yet, but we'll get there eventually. So my name is Adaponophobia Cogswell, previous host of the Trinity Force podcast. You can find us over on trinityforcenetwork.com. Now doing this interview series, and today's guest is SinSpitterX, also known as Kevin. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing good. Great. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You know, it's kind of humorous. I should have said Kevin, aka SinSpitterX, but you know, I've only known you as your screen name for a little under a week now.
True, yeah.
So Kevin reached out to me on Twitter after a post that I made in regards to wanting to talk to people that have performed in the video game industry in one role or the other. And his specific role, well, I'm going to let him talk about that a little bit more, about the game that he worked on and what he did. So Kevin, if you don't mind introducing yourself and what you did, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Kevin. I'm 28 years old and I live in southern Germany. That's why the accent. I guess you can already tell a little bit.
A little bit, but it's fine. We can understand you perfectly, so it's great.
So I have worked on SOS. We're gonna go into that a little bit later, like what the game looked like. But my specific position in the company was as a player experience specialist, which pretty much, like, a quick summary is we went through player reports. When people reported someone in game, we had to look over those cases and take action if needed. General customer support. We had like a little influencer program where we had to do the outreach pretty much and try to find people who want to join this affiliate program. And for me specifically because I'm German, I did translating for patch notes and official posts into German, pretty much.
So let's talk about SOS, the game.
Yes.
Because people listening to this may or may not know what SOS is or was. I can give a small recap based on the stuff that I've looked at, but I really do want you to talk about it more. But it was a unique style of first person. It's not even a shooter, but a first person game that involved guns and other tactical pieces. But I'll let you go ahead and really explain what SOS was.
Yeah. So I guess some people would kind of describe it still as a battle royale, like, to begin with, but it's like, I guess the terminology is a little bit wonky, but the one we used kind of was a asymmetrical multiplayer survival game. So kind of think like Dead by Daylight, where you had to like work together. But in this one, it was just you working for yourself. So it was 16 contestants entering each round. It was kind of like, if you think about shows like Survivor or Big Brother, where you have like different contestants, and you basically were stranded on this island, and you could form alliances. Like, pretty much you just had to hold one button, which would make the character lift a hand. And if someone else would do it and would run across you, boom, you're like a team now. But at the same time, people could also betray you at the same time. Like, as quick as you form an alliance, somebody can just betray you. And at the end, out of those 16 contestants, only 3 people can leave the island. So you had to try to figure out, like, who can I work together with? Am I doing this by myself and trying to, like, just do my own thing and hope nobody is gonna, like, cross my path? Or, like, how do I approach this? So every single round you played was different than the round before. Like, no single round was, like, identical to a different one.
So what was the end goal of the game? Or I understand the end goal was to get off the island, but what got you off the island?
So there were 2 components that you had to fulfill. One is find a flare gun. With the flare gun, you would summon a helicopter that would take you from the island. But with the flare gun, if you shoot in the air, there was like a big red trail. Pretty much, you would signal the whole island, like, oh, okay, somebody is signaling it. So people could come to you and try to hinder you from escaping the island. And another different part is there were some monsters, like some NPC monsters, and you had to find them on the map, and they had a specific item called a relic. So you had to kill them, grab the relic, and only if you had a relic on you, you were able to go into the helicopter. And then basically 3 people, the helicopter had 3 seats. So you had to find a relic, shoot the flare gun, and then it was a 2-minute delay until the helicopter arrived, and then you had to go there like in one piece and not die on the way, and then jump into the helicopter, and then the game would end pretty much.
So this all sounds like a really fascinating and awesome idea for a game. I really like the helicopter mechanic. I don't know if you're familiar with the game Ring of Elysium.
I heard the name, but I'm not familiar with the game itself.
It's a battle royale, a legit battle royale, much like PUBG. Mm-hmm. And the end mechanic for that game was we all fight around the end zone where there's a helicopter, and you climb into the helicopter, and that's how you win the game. So having, some kind of mechanic where you're fighting for the end point sounds really cool. And it sounds like this game had some kind of following, but doing some research, there's a little bit of drama behind it. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. Very correct.
So yeah, let's continue to talk about SOS before we get into your specific role, because I don't know if you agree, but I feel understanding SOS before we get into what you did and how you handled the situations just kind of makes sense, because people need to understand the the lineage or the history of SOS.
Yeah.
So from there, obviously that's the game. It launched on Steam in early 2018, but from my understanding, it launched at a pretty steep price and had minimal content.
Yes, that is very true.
Okay, can we talk a little about that? And when were you specifically? I should ask actually. Really, when did you join the team? Did you join the team before launch, after launch? When were you recruited to help out with the player experience?
Yes, so the launch that you were referring to in 2018, that was the official early access, and everything before that were like specific time periods, like closed betas and alphas. So the game was not constantly open. There was no open beta process that other games typically have. So it was, I'm pretty positive it was in the last closed beta phase, which would have been the end of 2017, like November-ish or something. That's when they reached out on Twitter, like did a post pretty much like, hey, we're looking for volunteers to help us handle the closed beta phase that we have. So originally, I don't know if it was for all the coworkers, but for me, it was like a temporary thing to help out with the closed beta phase, which was, I believe, like a 2-week period at that time. And then once that one was concluded and everything worked out well and the team worked great together, they were like, hey, actually, why not keep you in the team because everything has been working out? Why don't you want to put this into a full-time position and help us once we launch the game? So
were you with Outpost prior to SOS?
Yes.
So that's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, where did you start with Outpost, and how did we get into specifically SOS from there?
Oh, okay. No, sorry. Then I answered it wrong. No, I legit just saw the tweet, and a friend was pretty much reaching out like, hey, because my background pretty much is I do a lot of social media. I do like community management in like Twitch and content creation. So somebody was reaching out like, hey, actually, do you want to turn this into like a full-on profession? I saw this game company is trying to recruit people, and he linked the tweet to me, and then it was pretty much just like me applying, a quick Skype interview, and that's pretty much been the whole process. It was pretty quick.
Okay, cool. So that's interesting. So you started out as, it's like kind of like a community moderator on Twitch or on other channels and whatnot, and just happened to find the position open for you to join.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, so the opportunities just present themselves abound. So after all of these beta periods and whatnot, the game, I guess, officially launched, right? So that really started your role as this player experience or as you put it, player experience specialist, right?
Yes, correct.
So, let's describe... Well, so we're jumping around a lot here because we're talking about your role, we're talking about SOS. Let's roll back here, talk about SOS, and then we'll jump into player experience portion of it. So SOS launches officially, or even the whatever you want to call it, in early 2018. It's about 30 bones to pick up on Steam, and then what happens?
So back then, like the price point was already steep, but there were like different like tiers that you could buy in. So you got like different content pretty much. There were skins, you had different characters that you could kind of customize. So we gave like more customization options and everything. So $30 was like the cheapest price point out of those all, which was already kind of steep. So um that was already like the first point where people were like a little bit like, okay, this is kind of rough because we played like there was a following pretty much because in the closed betas and the alphas, um, it was always with a big streamer focus. So usually people that have been invited have been streamers. So their community was like, oh wow, now finally we can play with our streamer together. And then they were like met with the $30 price point where they're like, okay, this is kind of steep. Like,
Yeah, the way it's described, it sounds like you start out with only the one game mode, only the one map, and that can work out for some games, right? But when the playability is only 16 players and it's pretty much the same thing every time, and we still need to work out some bugs, $30 is you're basically buying an alpha for $30.
yeah, pretty much.
But people did it, and it seems like people loved it.
Yeah, so it was like a very good time on Twitch in general because that was when all the role playing streams were big because there was the GTA role playing that got big. Back then, Ark, the survival game, was pretty big where people had like role play servers and everything. So we fit right into like our own sort of niche on Twitch, which had like a following to begin with, and streamers were quick to jump on and then bring their communities into the whole experience with them together. So it started pretty much like with a little bit of a kickstart thanks to all the streamers being so involved with it.
Okay, so if we look at it that way, where it was more like a Kickstarter but on Steam, they were really just trying to get this game off the ground with minimal amount of money. Is that correct?
I would say so, yeah.
Okay.
Sounds about right.
Or minimal investor, however you want to bid, whatever minimal may be. So we roll through. We have Steam charts. Would you guys were you tracking Steam charts at all during SOS releases?
I personally did not like as a job. Like I did not have to look into metrics and everything, but out of my own interest, pretty much I did, and we have been doing pretty well at the beginning.
I'm actually going to look this up to see if I can't find old. I don't think I can find old stream charts for SOS. Because right now, SOS has an average player base of 0, of course.
Yes.
Actually, I believe it was like 2,000 to 4,000 players or so, right?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
Okay, and then content. Then please correct me if I'm wrong in my history. I'm doing my best to recall this off the top of my head. The player base started to dwindle a bit because, of course, it was $30 for one map one time. You could only play it so many times before you potentially got bored. But then content update 2 dropped, and that seemed to be kind of like a nail in the coffin, right?
Yeah, that's pretty much the point. Like there have been a lot of promises. We showed pretty early on, like, hey, there's so much content that we have in the future, pretty much like a different map, different weapons, all these kind of super fancy things. And then with content update 2, it's been pretty much very lackluster compared to what we showed on stream and what people were excited for. And it kind of changed also, not necessarily like too much the game mechanics, but it added things that people were not super satisfied with. Like we added a sort of armor to the game where usually if you were just quick to just put a headshot onto somebody, they were pretty much dead. So which was the whole point with like the whole betrayal something. Now suddenly they have like this helmet and armor, and then you cannot do all the things that you had before pretty much, and you had to pretty much play it differently than you had to before, like the way people enjoyed playing it. So they were not happy with the whole content update in terms of what we did deliver and things we did not deliver that we pretty much promised earlier.
So I know that you were doing player experience. I have to I'm going to say I have to imagine, but you'll be able to correct me. But I have to imagine that you were at least in some of those meetings to have an understanding of what was going behind the scenes. Do you know what it was like behind the scenes when they were trying to come up with these extra like armor and helmets and whatnot, and kind of like the idea they were going forward with the game, or did it seem like everybody was kind of floundering and coming up with random ideas, what they thought was cool and what people might like?
So we had like a little bit of like I would say it was no longer than usually like 1 or 2 weeks max where we knew, okay, this content is coming. So we had like an idea so we can prepare for stuff. In case there were tickets coming in, or so that we pretty much like on the day it launches, if there are any errors or like people are asking about specific content, so that we know what is supposed to roll out, how it is supposed to work. But we never had like the whole roadmap, which people
Gotcha.
potentially probably had like in studio.
Okay, I guess that leads me into that next question: is how disconnected was it between player experience and the studio? And it sounds like it was fairly disconnected, right? Like you guys didn't have a whole idea, but you did get a heads up. Like, you know,
Yes,
we're introducing
correct.
this game mechanic. This is what we expected to do. You know, expect such and such to come in.
Yes. So the whole like we had our own like Slack, pretty much our Slack workspace and everything, but all our communication pretty much, or like our higher up that we would talk to, was the community manager at that point. So
Gotcha.
that one was the highest up pretty much that we talked to, and he then put together the notes that we prepared or like what we talked about, and would put that to other higher ups, but we wouldn't get into that whole process or like get involved with that. So all our communication was pretty much through the community manager at that point.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's content update 2. That drops.
Yes.
And then we start moving forward and the game starts to dwindle further and further. So what happens after content update 2?
So pretty much like we had weekly live streams, and the tone pretty much like shifted a little bit from people being excited about future stuff being more about like, hey, why are you not fixing pretty much the things that nobody likes? Like the armor was pretty much, I would say, it's tough to give numbers, but I would say the big majority, like maybe 2/3 of the people, did not enjoy it. But there was pretty much like no like update fixing any of that, or like even reducing the armor. There was like no change to it, despite
Right.
there being such an outrage.
Well, see, I could see that from like you said. Really, I'm just reiterating what you said before. The fact that I could decide just to turn and pop somebody in the head, and now you're off my team, and I'm going to steal the relic or whatever. That's gone. Right now, you're
Yeah,
wearing a helmet. Now I can't just betray you or stab you in the back. Literally, I can't stab you in the back. You're wearing armor, and that kind of goes against any and all that. I guess that what the game was trying to go for. Now we're moving really into more battle royale territory.
exactly. And with the whole like, pretty much you could talk to anyone, like
Kind of like
in
a
the
world
game.
chat. Just press my T
Yeah,
key or whatever, and I can talk.
exactly. So pretty much many people came into the game really just enjoying the whole role-playing aspect, and they weren't even like necessarily about winning the game. They were trying to produce funny content either for YouTube or for their stream and everything. So suddenly they had to play, or were forced to play like tactical, like, oh man, how do I get past this guy if I have to put like 5 bullets into him so I can keep doing my shtick, pretty much.
So now you have to change up your stick.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So we were forcing people out of their preferred playstyle and forcing one specific one that people would not agree with, pretty much.
So I know I keep dipping back into what you're doing because I really do want to get into behind the scenes after this. And again, I really want people to understand what SOS is and what it was like. But how was morale, or what was it like behind the scenes? As really, it seems like content update 2 was again, I'm gonna say nail in the coffin. That was what it started. How was it behind the scenes with all the tickets coming in and whatnot over? I guess
Yeah. So
yeah, you get it.
yeah, so pretty much like I also did Twitch moderation, so I feel like Twitch streams are a little bit more open about negativity. Like in the tickets,
I'm laughing
so, like,
because it's Twitch, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. So in the tickets, it's still like, oh man, I paid for this game. So pretty much, I don't know if they were afraid to be banned or anything, because that's nothing that we did. But I feel like in the game or through the official reports, people have been a little bit more polite to begin with. And we were like, okay, like
Well,
we're
the
sorry about the
anonymity,
inconvenience.
anonymity's gone at that point, right? Because
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
logged in with your account or whatever it is, and saying, "Hey, I don't really like this game, but please don't ban me."
Yeah, kind of, exactly. And also, like, all of those responses had, like, the official, like, Kevin, player experience specialist on the bottom. So it
Mm-hmm.
felt a little bit more official, like, more in touch with the company to get an answer from. That for some, it might have been okay. For some, they were not getting the answer that they hoped for. Rather than just, like, having a random name in Twitch chat tell them, oh, yeah, this is going to change sometime soon. It felt like more official
Sure.
through the reports. So that we definitely did see a shift in tone a little bit, but it was like not to an extent we were like, okay, this is like going way down right now. This is not good. So it
So,
was like still okay. Morale rise. It was the first time
okay.
where we were met more with negativity than positivity, and it was definitely like you could feel it, but nobody was like super concerned. At least I didn't feel like or like see other people being overly freaking out over the fact.
So now we move into what I believe is the next phase, where it's SOS Classic and SOS Battle Royale, correct?
Yes, correct.
So go ahead and explain to me Classic versus Battle Royale. What happened?
Okay, so pretty much SOS Classic was the original game mode as we had it. But as the numbers have been like dwindling and things have not been pretty much like it was not the amount of sales that we hoped for and everything, we pretty much like did not know there's a big change. It was suddenly announced to us just as much as to the player base. Like, hey, okay, from this date on, which was like, I think it might have been like May, end of May, early June 2018. So that's like a couple months after early access, which is not a long time. Where it got announced, okay, we're gonna change this game completely into a battle royale. So pretty
Okay.
much the everything that the game had that made it unique, the whole like teaming with people, even just being able to speak to other people, it got completely removed. It simply is like you get thrown on the island, find some guns, be the last one to survive the circle, and that's it. Pretty much your generic like battle royale that everybody did at that time because it was the hype thing apparently to do. And like, hey, let's boost our numbers by just throwing out a battle royale because it's the go-to genre.
Right, and that was the big time, right? The end of 28 or mid of 2018 was Battle
Yes,
Royale. Everybody, PUBG was huge. Ring of Elysium's coming out. Fortnite's gigantic, of course,
exactly.
and it makes sense from a like a studio standpoint. Excuse me, from a studio standpoint, you want to. You want your game to be the most successful it is. You see battle royals are huge. Suddenly you're like, oh, we're going to make one. We're going to turn this game into it. But that's not what people signed up for or paid for.
Exactly.
So we've pretty much talked about it. There's some other things in between. I noticed that at some point people, I'm assuming studio execs or whatever, said, yeah, just give them free stuff. And then they unlocked literally all the content for everybody to play.
Yes, correct. Pretty much like, hey, you did pay money, but not for this game. But hey, on us, as a little thank you for the early support, have all of the items unlocked, in which were like avatars, skins, like the usual cosmetics that you get thrown at in other battle royales as well. So it was not even like a bang for your buck. Pretty much, it was just like, hey, you unlock everything right away. You don't have to level the game to unlock stuff.
Right. We know we screwed up here. Let's try to make it better.
Yeah, kinda.
Right. So that is in under a year, because in October of 2018, Outpost put out an announcement, hey, we're shutting it all down. Numbers have dwindled so poorly, we can't get people in this game anymore. It's down. And in November of 2018, the game completely shut down, correct?
Yes, that is correct. Yes.
Okay. So that is the history of SOS. Now we're going to backtrack because I want to talk about your history throughout the game and what you did and, your player relations status and what happened when the game ended, what it was like there. So rolling now, pressing rewind, going back to the beginning. How was it behind the scenes? What's it like being player relations? Were you on Reddit? Obviously, you said Twitch. I see the reason I ask all these, and I'm sorry if I'm, really, really trying to get this fleshed out, is because I'll go on to the Division forums and or Modern Warfare is a better one. And
Yes.
and somebody will post there, a dev from Infinity Ward will post, and they'll either get downvoted into oblivion, or people will just give them death threats or whatever, right? Then they just want to stop posting because of that. So what's it like being player relations and having things like that come at you? Can you tell me about what it's like to have players interact with you in the official forums and Twitch chats and whatnot?
Yeah, so as I was stating earlier, at the beginning it was still, except for Twitch chat a little bit, but also we had the options to moderate it. So that way we could kind of just delete any comment that we didn't like, which is not the same thing you can do with official reports. You cannot just ignore them or just delete and, oh yeah, that guy never reported anybody, pretty much. So that way you were forced to interact with every single negativity that was thrown at you. So there were definitely a couple, especially towards the end, there were phases where it took a couple days for at least one positive message to come through, or just a regular customer support sort of deal. It was just straight up negativity. We were called scams. As you said, the classic death threats and pretty much people threatening to sue us and everything. So it's definitely knowing at the start of a shift, you had to kind of prepare for that. I pretty much were I don't know how to describe it. You cannot pretty much prepare for something that you don't know what you get confronted with yet.
Right.
Because you don't know what the people are actually writing. But I definitely had to ground myself before I go into the shift, towards the end. Sometimes it's it's pretty much, how should I describe that? At the end, we only could give out canned answers, pretty much copy paste sort of deal. Sorry about the inconvenience. I know this is not what people liked or hoped for and everything. When the person on the other end wrote 16 paragraph sort of why did you do this? Which I definitely did know that little sorry is a band-aid on a gaping wound. I know my sorry is not gonna help him. I know I cannot undo the changes, but I still have to reply to them and hope that they somehow get our side a little bit.
So I laugh because I can only imagine what it's like to get into the headspace of I know that I'm going to be berated. I know that people are upset with this game. We went from being, relatively popular to now where we're at. And I can only give canned responses. How long was a shift for you? Let's start there. How long was a shift? Was it an 8-hour shift of answering tickets?
So at the beginning, yes. And then, of course, once numbers didn't do too well, people got laid off a little bit. We had a very big group, to be fair. I think we started as 13 or 15 people on the team, so that we could have 24/7 support and people would shift through. And then, of course, with a dwindling player base and you not having reports come in much, the team got laid off a little bit. Sizes got reduced. You never knew oh man, am I gonna be on the team for much longer anymore? So at the end we were still part-time. It was 4 hours a shift, but there could have been patches in those 4 hours where there were 2 hours of no report coming in at all.
Wow. Sure. And that makes sense, right? It's not always negative, and people aren't always going to use that as a avenue to air their grievances. How big was the team that you worked on?
So pretty much the player experience specialist team, like I said, I believe it started at either 13 or 15 people. And then by the end, when I got laid off, pretty much, which was the very last layoff, pretty much, I think we were at 5 people max.
Okay. And
which was pretty much in October.
Gotcha. And that makes sense, right? At the very end. Were you posting on Reddit and whatnot? Because there is an SOS subreddit, of course.
I have moderated it. I did not post on it much. Pretty much my official um posts that went out were pretty much just the translations of the official posts, which got given to me. I just had to translate them. And I did a little bit of moderation and answering on the Steam forums.
Ah, right. Steam forums. Honestly, I forget they exist.
Yeah.
But it seems to be a popular place that people go to when they're talking about a game and trying to get answers to, the different questions.
Yes.
So from being behind the scenes, and if this is too personal of a question, it's not going to be super personal, but if it's too personal of a question, please don't answer it. How was it? Like, were you guys being paid on time? I'm assuming you were being paid for your work. Was there ever any, was there any lull in kind of paychecks or anything like that as the game started to dwindle?
Actually, to be fair, all of the behind the scenes concerning that has been like no problems at all. There's never
Okay.
been a moment where there was like no pay, late pay, unfair pay or anything. At one point, actually, that was when the player base was dwindling quite a bit. We were actually like offered. It was free for us to do so. We were not forced to do so. If we would play outside of our usual shifts, we would get paid to actually just play the game to
Oh,
populate the player queues. But all
and
of
that
that
makes
was
sense.
also, yeah, but all of that was all like, hey, we can offer you like up to so many hours. Like, please don't log any more than that. But if you feel like it, you're free to do so. Simply just add it to your invoice, and if not, it's totally fine. So,
Well, that's awesome because something that I don't necessarily want to highlight, but if it's a rampant, it seems to be. I follow video game Twitter. I won't video game industry Twitter, for lack of better words, and it seems like sometimes there are studios where people are overworked or underpaid or they're not paid on time. I have a coworker who did develop behind the scenes to the point where he has told me that he wishes he would have taken some equipment from them because he didn't get paid. Right.
yeah.
And it's good to hear that at least the studio was trying to make it right, but the execs, without sounding too harsh, didn't have the right head on their shoulders.
Yeah.
So as a player experience, and behind the scenes, with SOS, was there a giant PR mess? Because this is where I want to lead into Snoop Dogg.
Yes. So, I guess, should I just dive into it right away?
Yeah,
Like,
let's
this
go.
situation?
Let's talk about Snoop Dogg and what happened with there,
Okay.
what you had to deal with the fallout of Snoop Dogg.
Yes. So, for the start of the early access, suddenly, like, even we didn't know on the team, it was just like a message, hey, from the community manager, like, hey, I will not be around, like, for today. I will be traveling for the next 2 days. But tune into the stream. Like, would be cool if you're around, you could like moderate the chat a little bit. We got something cool like coming up for everyone with a winky face. So
Okay.
even we were like, okay, we got something cool coming on. I guess something like a big surprise for the launch, maybe a new in-game item or a new game mode that nobody talked about, which I was like thinking that would not be the case probably because we would have known about the game mode. So it had to be something like I had the feeling something outside of the game had to happen. So I was like, okay, this sounds interesting. And then suddenly it got tweeted out like, hey, Snoop Dogg is live now playing SOS. And we're like, wait, did that just say Snoop Dogg? Like the Snoop Dogg? So of course, me even not knowing what's going on, like I pretty much tuned in to the stream, and the stream was like not super long. I think it was like 90 minutes to 2 hours max, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And at the beginning, it seemed like all cool. Like he had so much fun with it. He got like really into his character and trying to be like this badass gangster, pretty much like typical Snoop Dogg stuff that you would expect. Like
Sure.
how he interacted with other people, which was a custom game with other streamers. So they were prepared. Even the streamers, knew before we on the player experience specialist team knew, pretty much. But then throughout the stream, classic Snoop Dogg once again tried to like started smoking on stream, and then somehow the character was still moving while he had like one hand pretty much like not at any controller or any keyboard at all. To the point where later on he didn't even try to act like he was playing. Like
Right.
both hands pretty much in the air, like
Well, at one point he pulls up his cell phone and he's got a blunt in his hand and he's like texting or reading. It's that he's still playing on the stream, right?
exactly. At one point, like it turned out later on that our community manager was playing for him, and like even at one point, he pretty much role played like shooting in the air and like yelling pretty much like, "Oh, don't mess with me!" And then after that exact scene, he was like turning around, talking to someone off screen. Yo, that shit was hot. That was so cool what you did there. So everybody knew, okay, someone else is playing for Snoop Dogg. Like he is not playing. He's just pretending.
That's hilarious. I love it.
So yeah, pretty much like all the big other outlets like Kotaku, The Verge, everything. Pretty much instead of talking about like, hey, there's this new game coming out, the headlines were all like, hey, Snoop Dogg is on Twitch pretending to play a game. So it was all pretty much like hidden under the whole like it was pretty clickbaity for them. Of course, people would jump into like writing articles about it. So it was all like, hey, Snoop Dogg is pretending to play a game.
But no press is bad press, so I don't understand how this turned around on the SOS and the community, right? Like, you have Snoop Dogg. He's out here. He's a big name. Of course he's not playing, but he's having fun with it, and he's saying that looked really cool. So, you know, how did that really negatively impact it? What did you guys see as a player experience when it came to tickets or other community interaction from that? Were people really legitimately upset that he wasn't playing?
So for the tickets, it was like tickets were not really reflecting that whole situation as much, but especially on the stream, a little bit like when I watched like outside of the shift, just on Twitter and what people were talking about the game, they were pretty much like, why sell out? Why pay so much money just for someone to pretend liking your game? Pretty much like a sellout sort of situation. Like, hey, they must have paid him like so much money. Why not put that back into the company or like fixing the game?
Typical. Okay, sort of I understand.
Yeah. Because it was like only a one-time thing. Like he never went back and he probably never tweeted. I didn't check Snoop Dogg's Twitter, but I bet that was the only time he ever tweeted about SOS. Like I'm pretty positive.
Right. Yeah, no, you pay him once, you pay a big celebrity to get on there. I understand the idea behind it. And honestly, if with the right spin, it shouldn't be that big a deal, but I can see why some players would be upset. Players get upset about the most minuscule things in either way.
Exactly. Like it was an easy thing to jump onto because people were already sort of like not satisfied, and then hey, there's a lot of new people being negative about the game, like let me jump in on it, and then it was like kind of snowballing from there.
So now moving forward, we've talked about SOS, talked about the decline, talked about what it's like behind the scenes and whatnot with you. You know, where have you moved on to since SOS? Are you doing anything in the community? What is your full-time job now that SOS is, you know, it's no longer around?
Yes, so I'm currently still looking to get back into the whole game dev world, pretty much. Like, I just recently got married.
Congratulations.
Thank you, and it's the long distance relationship. So me being in Germany, her being from California, so pretty much making that whole work, getting married, now getting the whole paperwork done so I can move over. Mm-hmm. That was like taking up quite a bit of time and figuring out. So I pretty much focused more on my like personal life, I guess, pretty much.
Sure.
But I do social media for a game called Doom Trooper, which is a game friends of mine are pretty much working on. It's like a card game that was actually like a real physical card game in the 90s, which got discontinued, and they're bringing it now back into a classical, into a digital world, pretty much like reviving that whole world. So I do that, but it's on a volunteer basis without like a regular payroll or something.
So we're speaking of Doom Trooper, just because we're here. What can people play that? Where can they find it? You know, etc.
Yes. So pretty much, I guess the best point to jump in is either on our Twitter, which is at DoomTrooperGame, or like on Discord. Pretty much, we have like a pretty much inbuilt Discord function that we roll out slowly. That if you just join the Discord, you get an invite into the game. So I guess those two platforms would be the best. Doom Trooper Game on Twitter or discord.gg/secret-cow-level. That's the developers behind Doom Trooper. And yeah, that's pretty much the easiest. Or just reach out to me on Twitter at SinSpitterX, pretty much, and I can help out.
Rock on. We'll put that in the description of the podcast when this goes out as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no. And like I said, this whole point of this podcast, and depending on what episode this ends up being, is really to, I want people to find new games. I want people to understand what it's like being in the industry, and I want people to understand what it's like, mentally or physically, for the players that are behind the scenes that have to listen to the tickets and whatnot. Because we didn't really touch on that, because you said you had to mentally prepare yourself for these tickets and whatnot. What's it like behind the scenes when you have a failing game, or it's going to be an upsetting day? Is there anything that these players are doing that they can change, or what should they keep in mind when they're submitting a ticket or talking on the forums? Basically,
pretty
you're
much,
real people, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, surprisingly, like, we didn't have the whole tagline at the bottom at the beginning, like with our name and player experience specialist. And once we added that, and there was like a real name at the bottom, like the tone shifted a little bit as well. Like, people do sometimes forget there's like a real person at the other end who had to like read through it, deal with the frustration, and like try to work on that basis. Like, it's way different if somebody says like, hey, I have this and this problem, can you help me out? Or like, how does the future look like for this and that feature, rather than just like scrolling through caps lock slurs and like, I'm gonna kill your whole family, and then like, hey, when is actually the next patch going? It's like way different approach. So I guess the tickets actually, so, okay, specifically for SOS, it's like an interesting case as well when it comes to moderation, because the game is like one of the few where it's very focused on like language, talking to others.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty much like, I don't want to go into full detail like how the reports look like, or like how we ended up going through them, deciding like, hey, is this a real report or not?
Sure.
But pretty much,
I get that.
like,
yeah.
Because I don't know if other games use the same systems. Like, I don't want to give any loopholes or something.
Yeah, no industry secrets. We don't need to release any of those on this show.
Yeah, exactly. But of course, like, what happened in the game, either like through mechanics or like actual people talking, we had some way to look into like what people have been saying.
Okay.
And with the negativity, like, we attracted a lot of people who, like, there's apparently a big scene of people just griefing people in games and like doing that on YouTube and uploading videos like, hey, look at all the streamers I trolled, pretty much. So there was like a big phase where people were just trying to, especially with streamers and them having their own turn of services and everything, joining their custom games, throwing slurs around and everything. So doing that on a daily basis, just like hearing all those like slurs being thrown around, and like how, like, to what extent people would go just to get someone else in trouble, everything, that was kind of not necessarily frustrating, because at least I knew like, hey, if I ban that account, at least I did my part to make that stop. But just like, I guess a little bit disappointing. I guess disappointing is the best word to put it. Just to see like to what means, like how far people would go creating up to, especially after it went free to play, creating like up to 20 plus accounts just to mess with somebody.
Wow. I can see that. That happens all the time. People, we could talk about that ad nauseum, because that happens in most other video games that are free to play, or games that are easy. They have a low entry to play, or low barrier of entry, correct?
Mm-hmm.
But so from the behind the scenes, you just said you had the ability to ban people, or at least escalate it so it could be banned. what kind of toll does that take on a person to read these reports? I've decided after 5 reports this person has to be banned. I know they're going to lose out on $30. I can't imagine that it feels good to press the ban button at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, there's been like very rare cases where I like legit saw, okay, this person had like no positive intent from the very beginning, but it always did feel like not good having to take like bigger actions. So there was no like just like, okay, you can play the game or you get banned. We had like different options, either uh like for a couple hours, a 24-hour ban or something.
Mm-hmm.
So always having to like go through like how many times can I just give him like a tap on the hand and give like 24 hours so to go through with the whole ban like that. Even after like the 50th 100th time, it still wasn't like an easy decision. I was still thinking like, should I not? Because like at the end, like you said, people have paid big time money. Like $30 was the low entry. We had like 3 different tiers. I think the biggest one was at $90, and we even had to ban people who paid like $90,
Wow.
like completely from the game, which is a lot of money for a lot of people.
I should have asked you this earlier in the show, but was there DLC is not the correct word for it, microtransactions in the game?
No, there was not.
Okay, so it was $30 flat out or $90 flat out or whatever it was, right?
Yes, what we had was like sort of like a season pass situation.
Gotcha.
So you could unlock stuff quicker, pretty much like the other battle royales have sort of similar.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
Most of them do nowadays.
Yeah, but we had no loot boxes. We had no pay to win content or anything like.
So, well, great. I think we've really reached the end here because we've talked about SOS, we talked about your involvement in the community and what you want to do in the future, and and the stuff you're working on now, like you said, you're part time with Doom Trooper and whatnot. Is there anything else that you feel that I'm missing or that other people should know about what it's like to be in the video game industry or being behind the scenes?
So I guess like I said, I work completely remote. I only got the experience from within the whole play experience specialist team. Of course, you still connect somewhat with people in studio, like on Twitter, or every now and then, like on Twitch chat. Afterwards, you like whisper with them and everything. You kind of get what was going on there, but it is a very selective view that I can give on the situation. Like I never had the experience of sitting in a meeting and suddenly they were like, okay, so now when you sit back on the desk, you're gonna create like a completely different game. You're gonna abandon everything of your work. So I never had to do all of that. So it's just one perspective on the whole situation, pretty much.
Right.
It's not like the whole like rundown, pretty much. And it's like a very specific case. Like Outpost Games, which is a company behind SOS, like even closed down after just this. It was just this one game, the first game. It failed completely, and the whole company pretty much disbanded and moved on to different. So it's a very, I think, I've not looked into it very much, but I feel like I cannot recall a different company that had the same experience. Like, hey, we're gonna do one game. Oh wow, okay, this is not going well. Like, let's just close the whole company and like act like nothing ever happened, pretty much. So it's a very specific like experience. People should not be discouraged to try to do their own research on things, try to find their foot in video games, pretty much, just because this was a bad experience. Or like nowadays on Twitter, you see a lot like, oh, this company is crunching, this company has like massive layoffs, even though they have like the best quarter in sales they ever had, pretty much. Those are all very selective experiences, and there's so many companies out there, so many different people, so many different interests, and like there's so many companies out there with legit passionate people very like professional, very skilled at their art. So just because there's a lot of experiences out there, just as with the news, it's easier or like more interesting for people to read about all the negatives. There's like so many positives out there. So definitely don't feel like that all of this sounds absolutely terrible and it's going to be a bad experience if you still want to jump into game development or like anything game related, even in 2020.
Sure. Just know you have to, roll with the punches, right?
Exactly.
So, Kevin, I think I'm going to end it there. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you talking about SOS and the the community involvement and everything behind it. If people have any specific questions or they want to reach out to you, can they do that via Twitter?
Yeah, exactly. Like on Twitter at SinSpitterX, or like even per mail would be okay. It's SinSpitterX@gmail.com.
Rock on. My whole goal behind this, and I'm probably going to say this every podcast I do, is I want to introduce people to what it's like in the video game industry from every aspect, from being a QA to video game developer to player relations and whatnot. And so if they have specific questions, because they are getting into the role of player relations and answering tickets, I think that you could potentially be a great resource, especially going through the ups and downs that SOS did. So yeah, please feel free to reach out to him. Obviously, he would like to speak with you if you have any specific questions. So, and don't forget to go look up Doom Troopers. We'll find that link in the description of this podcast, and that's Sin/Kevin, however you want to be called, because I like to call you by both names. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me tonight. Thank you so much. This has been really enlightening.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and like giving me the platform to talk about it. Like I always felt like I kind of want to share the whole story because it's like such an interesting and like, I guess weird is a good way to put it. I don't know how to like say it. So I'm actually happy I got to give like a little bit more insight about the whole experience.
So everybody listening, if you have any questions, you can reach out to Sin specifically, or you can reach out to me. My email address will be questions, or actually, see, this is my first episode, so I'm going to have to edit this at the end of it. We do a little post-processing, so let me think here. You can reach out to me, Adam C., ADAMC at trinityforcenetwork.com. I'll answer any questions you specifically have, and that email address will update eventually to something a little bit more when I get a name for this podcast. So thank you guys for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoy it. We'll be back next week with another interview with another video game developer /QA/specialist. So thank you. And Kevin, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.